Hello and welcome. This video is the sewing instructions for the Tetiana K Patterns Classic Pencil Skirt. We start out by laying all our pattern pieces on the fabric, making sure to read all the instructions and markings on each piece. For example, the front piece is marked cut on fold, so I make sure to lay that line on a fold of the fabric. Next, we pin all the pieces to the fabric, or if you prefer, you can use chalk or fabric weights or whatever your preferred way of securing or transferring the pattern onto the fabric. And then you can go ahead and cut out all the fabric pieces as well as the fusible interfacing pieces. Make sure to mark all the notches, including the center front skirt waistband notch, which is on a fold. Let's also mark the drill holes. I'm using a pin, and I just poke the pin through all the layers, and then I take the paper carefully off, making sure that my pin stays in the fabric. Where the drill hole is, you can of course use thread or chalk or a special marker, whatever your preferred method of marking on the fabric is. Next, we head over to our iron and we iron on the fusible pieces. So that would be the waistband as well as the zipper backings on the back panel center back seams. Here is all the fused pieces, the way it looks after it's been ironed on. Next, we'll want to take the waistband and fold it along the length of the waistband, fold it in half and press it. This will really help us down the line when we're sewing to make sure everything is neat and lined up really well. So just press it all the way along. The next step is to sew all the darts. There are 2 darts on the front and 2 darts on the back that are marked by your drill holes and the notches along the waistband seam. So we fold the 2 notches together to form our dart, and the pin is the dart drill hole where the dart ends. Then I sew the curve of my dart, and I actually go a little bit past the pin because I don't like to backstitch over a pin, so I go about a 1/4 inch past my pin there. And the curve I make on the dart mimics the curve that is on the side seam. Next, we press the darts using a seam roll. I fold the inside of the dart towards the side seams, and then I line up the end of the dart with the curve of the seam roll, and then I steam it and very lightly press it. And if you're doing this on the right side of the fabric, you just want to be extra careful not to press your iron too hard so it doesn't leave any marks. Next step is to finish all the raw edges by serging them. Now we start to work on the box pleat on the center back. The first step is to put the 2 back panels together and line up your drill hole and put a pin where that drill hole is. We're going to put a small seam on top of the box pleat on the center back just to stabilize it while you're sewing the rest and working on the rest of the box pleat. You're going to want to start the stitch just below where that interfacing ends for the zipper, and you're going to go all the way down to the drill hole. Next, you're going to sew the inside seam of the box pleat, so it's these two edges here. And this is what those two seams look like when they are finished. Back to the ironing board, we press open the two seams we just did using a seam roll to make it easier. Once you've pressed those two seams, then you will want to press up the back hem following the notches on the side seam and the center back. So you'll just press it up all along the back panels. The next step is to shape and press your box pleat. So this will take a little bit of playing around. You just want to fold your box pleat as it would lay. So the width of the box pleat is 2 inches all the way down, and you can use the shape of the fabric to guide you. And just play around with it until it's nice and even all the way from the top down to the bottom. It's uniform. You can check on the hem. You can see the width it is at the bottom and how it looks. You can lift the little flap at the top of the box pleat to see and make sure that there's a nice straight line on the center front there. You can also run your hand along the top of the box pleat and feel to make sure that there's no diagonal little creases in there underneath in the folds that you've created. Once you're happy with your box pleat, press it really, really well. And again, you'll want to make sure you're doing this on the wrong side of the fabric, and make sure to test your fabric on a scrap, test the iron on a scrap to make sure that you're not going to burn your fabric, because you're going to really want to press this really, really well and get those creases really well into the fabric. Once you pressed your box pleat, let it cool off so that the creases set really, really well. And then you can pin all the layers at the top of the box pleat. Once your pins are in place, turn it over, and now it's time to mark the guides for the top stitch. For myself, I just put 2 dots, one at the beginning, one at the end. You can draw in with a chalk or whatever, the full top stitch, whatever you prefer, whatever's easier for you. So I'm marking, the box plate is 2 inches wide, so I'll just be marking 1/8 of an inch in, so 1 inch and 7/8 from the center front. And then just take a look, make sure it is even. Actually, one of mine looks a little bit higher than the other, so I'm just going to adjust that here. And now I'm ready for my top stitch. So the top stitch for the box pleat will be an upside down V shape. Starting at one of my dots, I will go at an angle towards the center back seam. And I want to land somewhere in the middle of where the seam allowance for the box pleat is and where the opening for the box pleat is. And when I land on this, my needle lands on the center back, that's when I'll pivot. When my needle is exactly in the center back seam, that's when I'll pivot and I'll go towards my other end point. Now it's time to work on the front. We're just going to press up the front hem. And now we can join the back and front panels together at the side seams. Next, press open your side seams. And when you get to the bottom where the hem is, just repress the hem with the side seam open. Now we will finish the hem. I do a top stitch, but you can do a blind stitch or whatever you prefer for the hem finishing. And I just sew that top stitch all the way around. To make sure that your hem is uniform all the way around, you'll want to use something as a guide. For me, the guides on my sewing machine aren't wide enough, so I use the edge of that little circle there. You can use a piece of tape, or if you have a wider guide, whatever it be, that works for you. Once my hem is stitched, I'm going to iron it. I'm going to iron it all the way around except the parts where there are creases for the box pleat. Once I did the rest of the hem, then I will refold the box pleat and press the hem again with the creases in the box pleat. Next, I am going to be working on attaching the waistband. So I'm just marking my center front notch here, and you'll notice that I haven't been using any pins or a lot of pins on my seams. That's just because I've sewn this skirt 100 times at this point. I don't need it, but you absolutely use as many pins as you need, especially if you're new. You'll want to pin the whole waistband, not just the center front seam like I'm doing here. And then I just sew the waistband to the skirt all along that seam there. And this is how it looks when the waistband is attached. Next, we'll press open the seam we just made. Press it open really well. This will be important later on when we need to close the waistband, so just press it open really well. Next, we're going to be putting in the invisible zipper. Now, everybody has a different method for doing this, especially if you have a machine that comes with a specific foot. So please do whatever is most comfortable for you. Follow the instructions that you know best. Follow the instructions provided with your machine. Or if you have a machine like mine and a foot like mine, you can follow my method. I'm just going to show what I do, and hopefully it's helpful to whatever method you're using. So my first step is to attach the left side of the zipper. I'm just going to put a stay stitch, a really quick stay stitch on the left side of the zipper. When I do this, I line up the top of the zipper with the fold in the waistband that we ironed in there. So for this skirt, I don't put a hook and eye. If you want to put a hook and eye at the top of the waistband, you'll want to move that down a 1/4 inch or so. So this is the opening of my zipper lined up with the fold. And here's my zipper with the stay stitch in. Next, on the same side, I'll stitch the actual stitch that goes under the zipper teeth. And I'm going to start 1/2 inch below my zipper notch, and I'm going to taper from the edge of the seam allowance towards that notch. And this is going to become really important later on when we're closing the bottom of that seam, of the center back seam. So you'll want to create a curve tapering away from the seam allowance edge to the zipper notch, and then up through the zipper under the zipper teeth. And then that little extra tab, I have a fabric on my zipper at the top. I don't cut it off, I just put a little stay stitch and get it out of the way. So this is what my zipper is looking like now, and pay attention, you see at the bottom where I start tapering away from the zipper teeth. And here's a closer look to the stay stitch on top of the zipper. Now I will close the zipper and I'll use a pen to mark where the seam is, where the waistband connects to the skirt, so that when I sew the other side of the zipper, I can line them up. So here's what it looks like with my pin marking the seam. And here's what it looks like when I've moved that pin a bit lower away from the seam so that it's not too bulky or crowded when I'm sewing under the zipper teeth. So now I'll go in and I'll sew in under the zipper teeth on this right side of the zipper. And again, I'm going to do the same thing and taper. Once I get to that zipper notch on my back seam, I'm going to taper away from it and go a little bit, about half an inch below. So I start tapering at the zipper notch and away towards the seam of the edge of the seam allowance. Next, I'll quickly add a stay stitch beside that seam I just did, just so the zipper stays close to the seam allowance and doesn't flap around. And lastly, I secure that little flap at the top of the zipper. And here's what those two seams look like at the bottom when I finish them. You see one is tapered away and one is just a stay stitch. And here I just close the zipper and check that my seams on either side of the zipper are about the same. The tapering starts at about the same level. Next, we're going to close the center back seam gap that's between the zipper, the bottom of the zipper, and the top of the box pleat. And I start sewing from the top of the box pleat seam that we put in earlier. And I'm going to sew all the way up to where that curve of the taper of the zipper begins. So here's what that seam looks like when it's in. And now I will press the seam that I just did, as well as the zipper. Next, I'll close the waistband around the zipper tops. So I do this by folding the waistband on itself on that fold line that we created, and just sewing a stitch along the fused piece there with the zipper in between. And again, I'm still using my zipper foot for this. And here's what it looks like when I've done both sides before I turn the waistband over. So at this point, you will turn the corners of the waistband, and when you close the zipper, you can check, make sure that it's even, and adjust as needed if you need to. Mine's looking pretty good. Next, I will lay out the skirts really flat and make sure that the waistband is really flat, and kind of, pull it, make sure it's flat and folded all along that line that we pressed there earlier. And I will pin all around the waistband, making sure that my pin doesn't cross. So I'll pin the two layers of the waistband together, but making sure that my pin doesn't cross the seam where the waistband is attached to the skirt. And finally, with the zipper open, I will turn over, and on the inside, I will sew the waistband to the seam allowance of the skirt. So this will hold the waistband folded in place. So usually, or often, not usually, but often this is done by stitching in the ditch on top. I really don't like that technique. I always have trouble with it. It never works well for me, and I find it really hard to take out. So I just, this is the way I do it, and it works really, really well for me, and it's super easy and quick, and I never make a mistake. As long as I pin the waistband really well, it always turns out great. So this is the way I do it. And here's what it looks like when you're sewing it. These are all the layers together. So you have the two layers of the waistband that's folded, plus the seam allowance of the skirt. And this is what it looks like when it's sewn together. And the very last step is to just press that waistband really quickly, and any other parts that might have creased or anything during your sewing, just sew press the whole skirt, and then you're finished. Thank you for watching and purchasing Tetiana K Patterns. I'd love to see what you made. Please connect with me at Tetiana K Patterns on Instagram. And please subscribe and follow on YouTube for more updates and new videos as they come out. Thank you again. Bye.